All right. Thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm going to share my screen and get us started on this benchmarking basics session. My name's Emily Andrews. I'm the Executive Director of the U.S. Green Building Council, Missouri Gateway Chapter, and I'm joined today by Rajiv Ravalapati from the City of St. Louis Building Division, who's going to co-present this session with me. So we're going to just jump right in and get started. And Rajiv, I'll go ahead and advance the slides when it's your turn to present as well, if that's cool. Great. Great. Well, thanks everyone for being here today. Here's our agenda. We've done our welcome and introductions. We're going to jump into why we are benchmarking. We'll talk a little bit about the Cities of St. Louis's Building Energy Awareness Ordinance, which is the benchmarking requirement. We'll cover how to benchmark, which will include the information needed for benchmarking, how to set up your portfolio manager account, how to enter your utility data. And then we'll cover the details of how you actually comply with the ordinance, and then talk a little bit about what happens after you benchmark and what you can do next. So why benchmark our building energy use? Benchmarking, the basic definition that we use is tracking your building's energy use and comparing your performance to the past and to similar buildings. This is called benchmarking. So you can track energy and water use, and then look at how that compares to your past performance or your baseline, and then also look at how it compares to similar buildings. And we really promote this as a best practice in the building industry because buildings have a big impact on the environment and also for the people who spend time in those buildings. I think the most important metric that I like to point out on this slide is that buildings in the United States, and this is residential and commercial, represent about 40% of our carbon emissions or our greenhouse gas emissions, which means they have a big impact on the climate change that we are experiencing. Locally, the impacts are even greater. You can see from this slide, this is the 2018 greenhouse gas inventory from the City of St. Louis, that residential and commercial buildings represent about 65% of the greenhouse gas emissions. If you add industrial into that, buildings are covering the majority of greenhouse gas emissions and are in the City of St. Louis. And I think a lot of people look at these statistics and get a little overwhelmed, but I look at them and I see an opportunity for our buildings to play a role as solutions to climate change and to make better buildings, that are better, not just for the planet, but for all the people who live on this planet and all the folks that spend time in buildings, which is all of us. We spend, as Americans, about 90% of our time indoors. Additionally, there's a lot of opportunity for energy savings. 30% of the energy used in buildings is wasted through inefficiency, according to the EPA. And this can be things like just keeping your lights on when you're not in a room, or it can be things like equipment not running properly because it needs HVAC needs a new filter, or so it can be really simple things. Additionally, half of all energy savings are possible through low and no cost operational improvements. Benchmarking is really the first step to saving energy, water, and money. And as we like to say, you can't manage what you don't measure. So talking a little bit about the city's Building Energy Awareness Ordinance, which I mentioned earlier, is the benchmarking requirement. A little context, the City of St. Louis has an aggressive climate protection initiative that includes, a really detailed sustainability plan and really detailed climate action plan, and a lot of different goals to achieve a greener and safer future for all of us. But in terms of how this policy connects with goals that the city has, it first of all reduces our buildings' impact on the environment. It helps us stay competitive with other cities, which is really important. It supports the building division's goals to maintain and improve our building stock, and it's really critical to help meet the city's climate goal, which is to be carbon neutral by 2050. So in this little infographic, you can see that building energy efficiency plays a big role in the climate neutral goal that the city has and the decarbonization goals that the city has. The Building Energy Awareness Ordinance was passed and signed in 2017, and the basic requirements are that municipal and private buildings that are 50,000 square feet and greater must track and report their energy and water use annually. This includes institutional buildings, commercial buildings, multifamily buildings. There are a few exemptions. If a building is under occupied or vacant, it wouldn't have to report for that year. Manufacturing is not required to report because they use energy differently than office or multifamily buildings. If there's some sort of financial duress or bankruptcy going on, and then state and federal buildings don't have to comply with local laws, but we do encourage them to benchmark and report their data. So if a building isn't in compliance with the ordinance, there are some penalties. There are fines that are written into the ordinance. In addition to that, a building that's not in compliance would not be eligible for new residential or commercial occupancy permits, which is something that the building division manages and could be kind of a big deal if you want to get a tenant into your building. We offer trainings like this throughout the year, and also there's assistance from both the USGBC and the City of St. Louis Building Division on getting your building benchmarked and reporting your data. And the reporting deadline is May 1st for the previous calendar year. So May 1st of 2022, you would be reporting your 2021 data. We like to show this map of existing building policies across the country. This is the most up-to-date version that we have available to us, and you can see that benchmarking and other types of existing building policies are not, it's not unique to St. Louis, and it is happening all over the country. It is not a trend. As I mentioned, it is a building management best practice to benchmark energy use and water use and other kinds of activities in buildings. So you can see that Kansas City has a benchmarking requirement on the books, along with St. Louis, Des Moines, Chicago, and a lot of other places in the Midwest and around the country. In addition to the Building Energy Awareness Ordinance, or the benchmarking requirement, the city also has a Building Energy Performance Standard in place that was passed and signed in 2020. And this is kind of a companion piece of legislation that helps to drive even more energy efficiency in our buildings. It applies to the same buildings as benchmarking, so buildings that are 50,000 square feet and greater, and they have to meet a minimum level of energy performance. The standard for different building types was set in May of 2021, so just this past year, and buildings have until May of 2025 to comply, and compliance actually happens through your benchmarking reporting. So that's why benchmarking is so important, and it's important to try to get it right. The metric for the Building Energy Performance Standard is weather normalized site EUI, or site energy use intensity. This is the energy used in a building divided by the square footage. And as I mentioned, compliance happens through benchmarking reporting. The ordinance, the Building Performance Standard ordinance that passed also created a Building Energy Improvement Board to oversee the implementation that's been appointed by the mayor of St. Louis. And they've been meeting for quite a while, to probably just a little over a year, to manage this process and manage the implementation. In addition, the city also has created an Office of Building Performance to assist owners, and we're lucky to have the staff of that office with us today. Just moving through some of the other resources that are available. This is the city's benchmarking website, stlbenchmarking.com. And this is where you want to go to find everything you need to know about benchmarking, where you go to report your data, where you can find a lot of different resources, contact information. This is your kind of one-stop shop. So I'm going to just talk at a very high level about how to benchmark, and then I'm going to turn it over to Rajiv to get into the details of the process itself. So we use a tool called Energy Star Portfolio Manager for benchmarking. It's free. It's managed by the federal government, by the US EPA, and you can use it to track energy, water, and waste. As I mentioned, you can't manage what you don't measure. And this tool is really used by about 50% of the commercial building market in the United States. So it's a very well used tool, and there are a lot of resources available through Energy Star Portfolio Manager. So there are a couple different ways to benchmark your performance in Portfolio Manager and kind of just in general. The first is, we'll walk through each of these very briefly. The first is an Energy Star score. The second is a national median. The third is to compare your building performance to similar buildings in your portfolio. Let's say you have, you work for a school district. You can benchmark performance across your entire portfolio. You can also use past performance. You can set kind of a baseline of the very first year you ever benchmarked and see how you track compared to that moving forward. And you can also set a target performance in Portfolio Manager. So you can say, well, maybe my energy use intensity is a little higher than I want it to be, and I want to get it down a little, maybe 20%. You can set that target. So just going through a couple of these in more detail, there are a good number of property types that can get this 1 to 100 Energy Star score. So some of the most common, building types that we see that are benchmarking here in the city of St. Louis and across the country. And the reason that not all buildings can get this score is that there just simply isn't enough data available in Portfolio Manager, and the data sources that it uses to do the comparisons to provide the score for every single type of building. That said, you can still track your energy use and still get metrics out of Portfolio Manager, even if you cannot get the score. So we still encourage people to use it. And basically the score, this 1 to 100 scale, 50 is the, means you're performing right there in the middle, 50% better than all buildings that are similar to you, but also 50% worse than buildings that are similar to you. So the scale is that, 1 is the worst, 100 is the best. I do like to point out that this is the opposite of energy use intensity. Energy use intensity, you want to be a low number because the higher number means the more energy that you're using per square foot. With the 1 to 100 Energy Star score, if you're in that 1 to 25 and even 50 range, there is a lot of opportunity for improvement. So this is where you have your best opportunity for investing in the building and achieving energy savings. And then if you're in that 50 to 75 range, still opportunities for improvement, but probably you're looking more at operations and maintenance opportunities, and also perhaps retro commissioning would be a good opportunity for you to go back and kind of tune up all your building systems and see where there might be opportunities there. And then in the 75 to 100, that means you're performing better than, in the top 25% of buildings like you, and you have the opportunity to get an Energy Star certification at that level. The other way that you can benchmark your building in Portfolio Manager is to get this energy use intensity. Again, this is energy used per square foot, and Portfolio Manager will compare your building to a national median EUI for your property type. So this is just a little screenshot here showing that your baseline EUI was 17% higher than the median, but you've improved with your current EUI, and now you're doing better. So this is another way that you can track your performance. And just at a very high level, these are the steps that it takes to benchmark a building in Portfolio Manager. I like to refer to this because because it is relatively straightforward once you have all the information that you need. This is not brain science. This is entering data into an online tool that sometimes can get a little clunky, but it's easy to get used to it after a while. So you're logging in, you're adding your property, you're adding your energy meters, you're adding your energy data, and then you're reviewing the results. And we'll go through these steps in much more detail, but this is kind of the high level process that we like to follow. And again, I think I mentioned that there are a lot of resources available through Portfolio Manager. There are a lot of on-demand trainings that are available. There are live trainings that they do on a regular basis. So I encourage people to take a look at the opportunities that are available through Portfolio Manager. And then the city has a reporting checklist on their website at stlbenchmarking.com that walks you through the process. So you will benchmark the building first, and then you check for errors. You want to make sure you've added your building ID, and then you generate and submit your report to the city of St. Louis. So this is kind of the full picture, the benchmarking and then the reporting and compliance side of things. Again, we'll walk through these in more detail. So I'm going to turn it over to Rajiv to talk through the next part of the presentation.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, as the slide says, we're going to talk about the information needed for benchmarking, and we're going to go over the process of the actual step-by-step of setting up your property and benchmarking your building in Portfolio Manager. So the first thing about setting up a property is you want to detail what the property is itself. You want to give it, in Portfolio Manager, you want to detail the property name if it has one, the address, the total gross floor area, and for the purposes of benchmarking, complying with the city's ordinance, you want to capture the total gross floor area of your building, not just the percentage that's occupied or operational. You want the total gross floor area, including the basement. You want the year built. You want that occupancy percentage level. So, for example, if your building is 10 stories and 9 out of 10 floors are occupied or in operation, 9 out of 10, you've got an occupancy percentage of 90%. Very simple to figure out. You want to figure out if you're a building that has multiple buildings. Are you a campus? Are you a single building? Are you a building that's currently in the design phase? These are all the property use details that Portfolio Manager will ask of the user when you're setting it up. And for jurisdictions like St. Louis that have a unique building ID, what we call ours is the St. Louis Benchmarking Building ID. These are unique characters that we use to track the compliance of each building in our covered buildings list. And you can find your unique St. Louis building ID on the homepage of stlbenchmarking.com. So again, I quickly touched on this before. Gross floor area, it is one of the most important metrics that you're going to input into Portfolio Manager. So according to Portfolio Manager, their definition of gross floor area, or GFA, is the total property square footage between exterior walls of the building. And that means all finished areas. And I do want to stress the word basement. You see that there in bold because we want to capture the total gross floor area. Oftentimes people forget about this area of their building when they're entering in their GFA. So it's very important to include all your finished areas, your elevator shafts, stairwells, mechanical spaces, basements, etc. This is not the same as rentable or leasable space. And in terms of Portfolio Manager, they don't recommend using parking square footage in your total gross floor area. Now, there is a dedicated FAQ page about gross floor area, which is highlighted in the link on this slide. But for the terms of benchmarking, we do not recommend incorporating parking square footage in your total GFA. So in order to determine your gross floor area, you'll have to look at a couple, potentially will have to look at a couple of resources. If you don't have internal documentations like your life safety drawings, architectural plans, or actually taking time to measure the physical space. These are some tactics you may have to do in order to determine what your GFA is. And the reason for that is because your gross floor area impacts your energy metrics. So you want to try and get this right the first time. One of the nice features about Portfolio Manager is that anytime you're putting in metrics, you can mark them as temporary values during your initial setup. But you always want to confirm any data point you're putting into the tool. You want to make sure you're confident that it's the right value. But until you find the exact gross floor area, you can put in a best guess and just mark it as a temporary value. And again, one of the nice things about Portfolio Manager is that there are FAQs for almost every facet of the benchmarking process. And there's another link on the bottom of this slide for FAQs about gross floor area details. So when it comes to utility data, St. Louis's ordinance requires calendar year utility data, so between January 1 and December 31st of each year. If you look at most utility bills, you'll notice that utility bills don't line up with calendar years. So most likely you'll need to gather 13 years of bills to capture either that early part of the year or the last part of a year. With our ordinance, we're tracking energy and water usage used on the monthly basis for the entire calendar year. In Portfolio Manager, water and all fuel types used in the building, all the fuel types can be electricity, natural gas, district steam, energy purchased in bulk, which are things like fuel oil, propane, diesel. Not many buildings in our city have energy purchased in bulk, but it's always good to double check if you are a building and you are unaware that you have these kind of things. You may need to go to your facilities manager to find out about some of these things. But for most people, for most buildings in St. Louis, you're going to be simply tracking your water, your electricity, and your natural gas. There are a lot of buildings, there's a good chunk of buildings in downtown St. Louis that are on the city's steam loop. So you will be having to track district steam. For many of the city-owned buildings that are required to benchmark do use district steam. So we've got to make sure we're capturing all four of our fuel types. So in Portfolio Manager, when you're actually entering in your utility data, what you see here with an asterisk is what's required in the tool. You'll need your start date of the billing cycle, the end date of the billing cycle, the usage of itself, so the consumption. Cost is not required, but at the city, we always recommend to folks to track their costs. That way you can get a better understanding of how much energy you're using, or the energy cost of we're using, and also figuring out the cost per square foot metrics, another metric that Portfolio Manager will generate for you. And you'll also need to mark if your consumption is an estimation or not. And you want to always make sure it's not an estimation. Since you're pulling these directly from your utility bills, you should have confidence that that is the accurate data. If you ever feel like you are unsure of your consumption, you can always get in touch with Ameren or Spire or Ashley Energy or the water division if you're uncertain about the quality of your data. And then these last two metrics are about purchase electricity on only demand, and then the demand cost. For Ameren, they do provide these figures on their bills. It's not a requirement of the ordinance, but it's just another metric that you can enter in Portfolio Manager. So now we're going to talk about the actual process of setting up your Energy Star Portfolio Manager account. Pretty fairly, another process in the whole benchmarking system that's pretty easy to do. So in order to set up your account, if this is your first time ever using Portfolio Manager, you'll want to go to energystar.gov/benchmark. We include this link on the city's dedicated webpage, stlbenchmarking.com. But if you've never seen this before, this is the URL where you sign up and create an account, and where those blue arrows are pointing, that's where you can sign up to create your Portfolio Manager account today. So after you sign up, you'll get a activation email sent to whatever email address you provided. You'll click that link to activate it. And then once you're logged in, this will be the first step of using your portfolio manager account, adding a property. So underneath the My Portfolio tab, you'll see a blue button that says Add a Property, and you'll click that. Once you click that, what Portfolio Manager asks is basic building information. So from the top down, it'll ask you, selecting a property type, whether you're a hotel, a school, a warehouse. There's over 20 different main property types, and then there's various sub property types under each of those umbrella terms. Your second step, you'll want to select the number of buildings. It will ask if you are a single building, if you are part of a building, or if you're more than one. There's special guidance for buildings that are for properties that include multiple buildings. That's what Portfolio Manager calls campus type buildings, and there's a separate FAQ on how to set up your buildings if you are indeed a campus property. And then the last item it wants to know your construction status. So if you are an existing, if you're currently in the design phase, or just a test property. One of the nice things about Portfolio Manager 2 is that if you want to just select a test property, you can play around with the tool and figure out how the tool works in its full functionality and getting just some mock features enabled. So after you've set up your property, you're going to put in the basic property information. We talked a little bit about this in the previous slide. It's going to ask for the name of your property, if you have one, the location information, and the year built. And then as you scroll down, it's going to ask you the occupancy percentage. So this is just, again, talking about what amount of space in your building is actually occupied. Again, for example, if you're a 10-story building, 9 out of 10 of your floors are operational and occupied, you've got a 90% occupancy rate. So it's just that percentage of the gross floor area that is occupied and operational. It is required. It doesn't impact your energy score or your metrics. If you don't know the occupancy percentage, you can enter in a good guess and move on. You can always come back and update the value once you know it for sure. After this, you'll want to check any statements that apply. Things like, does your property's energy consumption include parking areas? Does your property have a data center? Does it have one or more retail stores? Does it have one or more restaurants? These type of selections will really impact some of the metrics going forward. So you'll want to verify these things if they pertain to your building. So we're back to property use details. And what this slide is showing is now sub-property use details. So you're giving more information to Portfolio Manager about describing your property. So for the example here, looks like this example is looks to be like a supermarket or a grocery store. So it's asking, again, the gross floor area. It's now asking about the weekly operation hours. It's asking about the number of workers on the main staff. So you want to put in these values, and you'll also want to put in date values. How current are these metrics that you're inputting? Again, if you're unsure, you can always mark them as a temporary value and go back. One thing to note is these property use details are unique to depending on the property type you select. So if you chose a warehouse, it's going to ask you for different property use details versus a grocery store versus a data center versus a hotel. So these are really unique to the property use, the master property use that you assign your building from the get-go. Like I just said, yeah, these details vary by property type. You can use Portfolio Manager's online data collection worksheet to compile this information. What some of these screenshots are showing is, it's picking your country and your property type to get started. Again, there are 23 property types in Portfolio Manager that are eligible to Energy Star score, and then there are sub properties within each one. So on this slide on the left, you can see banking and financial services is an umbrella property type, education, entertainment, and public assembly. And then you will want to collect the additional data collected for each of these property types. This is a frequent question about adding another type of use in Portfolio Manager. This is really important, particularly if you have an office building that is also, a good example is Embassy Suites Hotel in downtown St. Louis. That is a hotel that is apartments, and there's also retail and restaurant space down below. So that's a building that has multiple property use types, and that's something you'll want to break out if each of those property types have a significant amount of square footage dedicated to each one. When you're doing this, when you're adding multiple space types, less is more. You want to enter as few as possible, but there are protocols for breaking up your spaces in Portfolio Manager in order to get accurate data. So if a property use type that can get an Energy Star score, so one of the scenarios to break out a space is if a property use type that can get an Energy Star score, you'll want to break that out. If it takes up more than 25% of your gross floor area, that's another reason to separate and add a unique space type. If the space is vacant or unoccupied office, and if the operating hours are more than 10 hours different than the main property use. Again, less is more, but these are the guidelines to break out those space types. With multifamily housing, when you're calculating the gross floor area, you want to make sure you're including the living space in each unit, both occupied and occupied. You want to factor in all the interior common areas, so things like the offices, if there's a pool, community rooms, kitchens, lobbies, fitness rooms, hallways, stairways, elevator shafts, corridors, storage areas, mechanical rooms. These are all needed for your gross floor area. You don't need to include breezeways, air stairwells, or similar areas that are not fully enclosed, and they don't need to be part of that gross floor area. And again, Portfolio Manager is a very, very helpful tool. It's got guidelines and FAQs and trainings for almost every type of question you may ask. And there's a dedicated multifamily housing definition for more detail if you just click the link below in the slide. So now you have set up your property, and now we can move toward, you've got your property set up, you've got the property use details. Now we can move to the next section of getting your property benchmarked, which is adding the utility meters. So in Portfolio Manager, there are three main types. There's energy, there's water, and there's waste and materials. To create a meter, right now looks like we're under the energy tab. You'll see another blue button that says add a meter. You'll click that. Anytime you see a blue button, by the way, that corresponds with an action item. So when you're adding a meter, it's going to, again, first ask basic information about the energy sources before you actually enter in those required utility data metrics. So right here, we're getting started on setting up the meters. You want to select, what's the meter that you're creating. And you've got options right there from electric all the way down to chilled water. Once you've selected what type of meter you're setting up, for this scenario, it looks like we're setting up a natural gas meter. You can give your meters names. Oftentimes, especially if you're a building that has multiple meters, I will name the meters according to the account numbers given on our utility bills. That's why it's an easy way for you to know which consumption goes which meter. So you can put in a meter name, you'll select the type of meter, and then you'll select the units of consumption for each meter. After you put in the units, it'll ask you for a date the meter became active. This is a flag for us to call out right now, because this is a frequent issue for some folks. The date the meter became active should be the same as the start date of your first bill. I'm going to say that again because we do deal with this issue time to time. The date the meter became active should be the same as the start date of your first bill. It's not asking for the historical installation date. Whatever bill you're using as your for entering in, that should be the same start date. Anytime you see blue lettering in Portfolio Manager, you can put your cursor on it and it'll give you the definition of that term. So now we set up our meter. We've given a name, we've given the units, and we've given the start date. So now we can start actually entering in that energy data. So for this example of our supermarket, it's got a natural gas meter, fuel oil, an electric grid meter, and you'll notice those 3 triangles to the left. You'll expand those meters by clicking those arrows, those triangles. And then once you do, so for this one, it looks like we're adding energy data to the gas one. So to actually start adding entries for your meter, you'll click the plus button where it says add another entry. Or if you don't want to do it line by line, entering each month's usage in Portfolio Manager, what you can do is you can upload it in bulk. So to the right of the slide, there it says upload a spreadsheet using template. Portfolio Manager has a data template where you can track in a spreadsheet all of your energy data, that start date, that end date, the usage, the cost, and the estimation, and then just keep track of it in your spreadsheet. And then once you've got your calendar year's worth of data for the meter, you can just upload it in bulk to Portfolio Manager directly. This is a very important step, hence why we have it in all caps, is selecting the meters to include in your metrics. So for our supermarket scenario, again, what you're seeing here is you want to select the meters to be included in your energy metrics. So here, the user selected fuel oil, natural gas, and electric. And then below, you'll see the total of 3 meters. Tell us what it represents. You'll choose these meters account for the total energy consumption for the supermarket. And this is a really important step. If you, it looks like you have, when you report to the city and we see that there's no consumption data, a lot of times it's because people didn't select the meters to include in their metrics. So don't forget the steps. If you do, it'll look like you haven't entered any data when you report to the city. So once you selected your meters, you'll click the blue button below that says apply selections. So now your property use details are set up and now your energy setup is complete. And you'll always get green note. You'll get a notification up top that says, that will indicate your meter has been created and been applied to your properties. And now underneath this energy tab, you'll see to the left, a gray box that shows your meter summary. And then to the right, you'll actually see each individual meter that's used to compute metrics. And you can now continue adding them or updating the bills to each corresponding meter. Now this is before we continue and talk about water and then reporting, does the following scenario apply to you? Do you have multiple buildings that share energy or water meters? This is a scenario where you're most likely a building on a campus. So there is a separate guide for campus benchmarking. Again, you can click the link right here to refer to that guide on how to set up your campus properties and properly add your energy metrics. Now for the supermarket scenario, we're looking at the water tab. To set up meters, it's the exact same process, just underneath a different tab. You'll click add a meter and go through the same steps that we just discussed for the energy tab. Okay. I just had a little bit of a brain fart. We're entering utility data. Can you go to the next slide, Emily? Gathering. Okay. So we just laid out all the steps of how you actually set up your energy meters and your water meters and enter in that data. If you don't know how to gather your utility data, there's a couple options. So one, if you are actually keeping track of your invoices, keeping track of your physical bills, you can use that and get that data directly from your Ameren or your Spire or your ASHRAE Energy or Water Division bills that cover the calendar year. Another option is, with most utilities these days, you can access your data online. So with Ameren, they've got, you can access all your information through amerenmissouri.com, Spire, spireenergy.com. And you'll also notice here is one thing that we didn't discuss until just now is what are the proper units of consumption for each utility. With Ameren, electricity is always measured in kilowatt hours, kWh. With Spire, natural gas can be measured in CCF, 100 cubic feet, or in therms. With ASHRAE Energy, steam is measured in KLBS, 1,000 pounds. Excuse me. And then with water is measured by volume, similar to natural gas, and that is also in CCF, 100 cubic feet. Also, you can access aggregated data. So both our electric utility and gas utility both provide monthly aggregated whole building data upon request. This is really useful if you got a multi-tenant building or a multi-family building. And the way to do that is the city has created a utility release form on stlbenchmarking.com. It's just a 2-page form that's very simple to fill out, and you can email it directly to Ameren and Spire. Each of them have a different wait time of when you can expect that request to be completed. With Ameren, it's usually 3 to 5 days. Spire, I would say give it about a week to get that request back. Excuse me. And they'll send you that monthly aggregate data that you can enter back into Portfolio Manager. It isn't, unfortunately, conducive to uploading it, just like the template Portfolio Manager has, but they'll provide you the all of your calendar year data by month to enter into Portfolio Manager. And then a third option too is, and this is a fairly new option now, is what's called Ameren Missouri Benchmarking Energy Efficiency Portal, also known as BEEP. Now, this is unique to only just Ameren and electricity data, where this is a new portal that will help you manage the benchmarking process by connecting your Portfolio Manager account to their BEEP tool, where it'll automatically upload your monthly aggregate used electric data to your Portfolio Manager account. They offer demonstrations. We just had our last one of the year back on November 4th, but this is a tool that the city and the USGBC will continue to coordinate on Ameren with on providing more demonstrations in 2022. But this is a great tool that Ameren offers to upload, to do automatic uploads, so you don't ever have to worry about requesting that data through the utility release form or going through piles of utility bills each year. This is a tool that automates that whole process and makes benchmarking easier for you. So here we're talking about adding utility data to an existing meter. So we're underneath the energy tab. You can see all the meters set up for this test building. You'll want to click either enter your bills, or you can click on each individual meter itself to enter your bills. And then once you're actually in there, so for here, we're looking at, looks like we're looking at a water one. You can manually enter that data or copy and paste. And again, if you've got your data using the Portfolio Manager's spreadsheet, then you can upload it in bulk. But you'll keep continuing to hit add a new entry, enter in your start date, your end date, your usage. Again, cost is not a requirement with St. Louis's ordinance, but we always recommend to people to track their costs because it is an important metric to seeing how much money you're spending per square foot of your building. So the upload templates are different for both electricity and natural gas, so keep that in mind. But they do allow you to upload that data in bulk for those meters. And then you can also create upload templates to update multiple meters and multiple properties at once. There is a training video on how to do this process. It's at the link at the bottom of this slide. And then, once you've got your property set up, you've got all your property use details, you've got all your energy and water usage in there for the previous year. Before you want to report, Portfolio Manager has this nice feature where you can actually check for errors. So right here, we're looking at a laboratory space. You'll see that there's a summary tab, and underneath the summary tab, there's where that arrow is indicating a button for checking for possible data errors. And you'll click check for possible errors. And what that does, if you just go back to that one slide, Emily, what that does is you can select the time frame for when you want to check for possible errors. And this is always a really good, I always recommend people to do this before you report. That way it saves you from reporting multiple times, and also making sure that the data that you're reporting is actually accurate and factual for the calendar year in order to comply with the city's law. Another scenario question: does the following apply to you? Do you generate renewable energy on site with solar panels or wind? If you are a building that does generate renewable energy on site, you will have to track that usage in a different way. But again, there is another guide in Portfolio Manager. It's called their Green Power Guide. It's very simple to track for buildings that have on-site renewable generation. So I would just recommend folks to refer to that link in the middle of this slide. And then to update your water meters, the same process as we just shown for your energy meters. You can either click enter your bills or just click on the individual meter to update. So, one thing before you get to the reporting process is, we often see common benchmarking issues each year. Anytime you see an Energy Star score of 1 or to 100, that always is most likely 9 out of 10 times a flag that your data has an error. And you may be a very high functioning building and you may be deserving of a 100, but you do want to check your data quality. And seeing a building with a score of 1 is always reason for concern. And the reason for these things could be because of incorrect gross square footage, incorrect property use details, there's missing energy use data, there's missing meters, you didn't apply the selections for the meters that account for your total energy consumption, or there may be simply typos in your usage data or your build dates. But these are some of the most common benchmarking issues that we see each year when people are reporting and complying with St. Louis's law. So now we'll get to the last step, reporting your data so you can be in compliance with the ordinance. So like Emily stated earlier, May 1 is the deadline to report for your previous year's data. And the way you report is go to stlbenchmarking.com and you'll go to the home page and you'll see a button that says report data right there on the river. This is showing your building ID lookup function. So again, each building in our covered building list has a unique St. Louis building ID. You'll want to make sure that's entered in Portfolio Manager because this is how we track compliance, and we'll show you how to do that next. So after you've gone through the city's tool to find your building ID, and it's just a quick address search, in Portfolio Manager, under each property, there's a details tab. For every property you create in Portfolio Manager, they'll all have the same tabs. You'll want to click the unique identifier section underneath details. In this, as this red circle indicates, you'll click the blue edit button. And when you click that, you'll scroll down. There's 3 buckets of building IDs. There's the portfolio manager ID up top. That ID is automatically generated from portfolio manager anytime a property is set up. There are custom IDs, but what you want to focus on is the last section, standard IDs. These are IDs focused for jurisdictions that have benchmarking laws in place, like St. Louis. You'll choose St. Louis building ID from the standard ID dropdown, and then you'll enter in your building ID, your unique building ID next to it. And all of St. Louis's building IDs either start with a P for private buildings, or an M for municipal buildings, or St. Louis public school buildings. So to actually report, you'll have to access a unique data request that the city creates every year. And to report that data, you go again to the city's benchmarking website. And as that red circle indicates, you'll click on that report data button. So when you click that report data button, it redirects you back into Portfolio Manager. It may ask you to log back in if you're logged out. And once you log in, it'll direct you to this data request. So here, this example, it's showing you the 2019 year benchmarking data request. It gives you some instructions. And then on the next slide, it will show you the bottom half of that page. You know, who is this data being submitted on behalf of? Most scenarios, you'll choose myself. Sometimes it'll be someone else where you've got a third-party consultant benchmarking on behalf of a building owner. And underneath the response section, the time frame will be locked out, so you don't have to worry about that. That's something that I control with as the building division creates these data requests every year. And then you'll choose your properties. You'll choose either if you've just got one, or choosing multiple properties. And once you've selected the amount of properties and who's submitting this data, you'll click the blue button that says Generate Response Preview. So after you've generated your response preview, the next page you'll go to is seeing if the response has actually been generated. And you'll see this green bar across the middle of the slide that says your new response preview has been generated. Anytime you get a green indicator, that's good. If you had gotten a pink alert box, that would have indicated that there are some data quality issues with the report that you just generated, and it'll identify what those issues are for you to correct. But if you got green, you're ready to submit. You'll see on that first row, that's your response preview. It's been generated, and it gives a timestamp of a date and a time. And then you'll want to choose from the action item, send response, after that response preview has been generated. So once you select send respond, it'll ask you, who should we send a confirmation email to? Portfolio Manager will send a confirmation email to whatever email account is, or whatever email address is corresponds to this account. You can also add in additional emails if you need to add in your property manager or your building owner or your facilities person. What format would you like your data in? We always tell people, keep it in Excel. XML is a specific coding language that the city will use to upload your data. And then you'll have to just sign off on your submission with an ESign electric signature, which is just certifying your results, your username, your password, and you'll click the ESign button. And after you click the ESign button, it'll reload the page. You'll scroll down and you'll see that it's been signed indeed. You'll click the blue send button, and then it'll ask you one more time, you're about to send your data requests to Department of Public Safety, Building Division. Please make sure that your information is complete and ready for submission. Once you continue, this action cannot be undone. Are you sure you want to continue? You'll click continue, and then you will be officially you will have officially submitted your data for the previous year with the City of St. Louis. So what happens to that reported data? Our Office of Building Performance, we publish annual benchmarking reports that highlight the results of each calendar year. We're currently working on our 2019-2020 year benchmarking data report, which will be published next year. We publish some of that benchmarking data on the results tab of stlbenchmarking.com. The ordinance allows us to publish some high-level metrics, such as address, ward, your Energy Star score, and your EUI. And then we create these annual reports that give a better explanation of how our city is performing, what this data means by property type. Are we trending in a direction where energy usage is going down, and then giving consultation on how our buildings can continue to improve their benchmarking and energy consumption going forward. So you've benchmarked, now what? So these slides will cover action items you can do after you've benchmarked.
And Rajiv, do you want me to pick these last ones up?
Oh, that's right. Yep. So I'll hand it back to Emily.
Great. Thank you. Thanks so much. So once you've gotten all your data into Portfolio Manager and you've benchmarked your buildings, there are a couple different things that we like to point out. First, it will give you that 1 to 100 Energy Star score if you're eligible for it. Here it'll be at the top. When you're in the summary tab, it'll be in the top right. So that's one thing to look for. If you can't get the 1 to 100 score, it will put your energy use intensity here. There's also a way to change this metric in Portfolio Manager to be like the kind of default that shows up when you log in. So that's an option as well. It will give you your greenhouse gas emissions, your site EUI, or your source EUI. So there's some different options there. And then, Energy Star puts out some pretty basic graphs, but they're really helpful in understanding your performance, your building performance. So you'll get a dashboard that shows all the different buildings that you have in your portfolio. And in this case, you've got a bunch of sample buildings, test buildings. That's what we've been able to screenshot here. It'll show you the date where the energy data is current. So this building last had energy data entered in March of 2017. It's got a little catching up to do. It'll show you the Energy Star score, if it's eligible, your site and source EUI, and then also you'll get some energy and water use graphs by calendar month, as long as your data is in there. We were actually, you'll see these spikes in January for natural gas, which is pretty typical, at least in this part of the country where we're using natural gas for heating. If you were to see a spike in natural gas in the summertime, that might flag a problem for you. You've got your solar data in this particular building that's pretty steady, which is good. And then the electric data, which again, you might be seeing these spikes in the summertime because that's where we're using electricity for air conditioning for the most part. And then, here in this water use calendar, or water use by calendar month, you see this huge spike in water use in January of 2017 here, and that most likely indicates that there's some sort of leak. And so this is helpful not just in tracking your performance and comparing it to other buildings, but potentially flagging issues with your building and the systems in your building. So the other thing to do after benchmarking is really start creating and implementing a plan to reduce your energy use. And we encourage people to start with no or low cost energy efficiency options, looking at simple things like, turning the computer off when you're not using it, or, having it in a mode where it goes off if you haven't used it for 5 or 10 minutes. Adjusting thermostat settings, turning out lights when you're not in the room, prioritizing preventative maintenance. I think that's a big one. And then, from there, you can look at lower cost or quick payback opportunities like tuning up systems, building systems, lighting retrofits. We have had some very rich energy efficiency incentives from Ameren for lighting upgrades. A lot of people have taken advantage of those over the past few years to get their lighting changed out to LEDs. And then there are obvious obviously going to be higher cost opportunities or places to invest in the building, so that, when you're ready to upgrade your heating and cooling equipment, you want to look at the most efficient options as possible. Another option would be to conduct an energy audit to help you prioritize actions in your building. An energy audit will typically give you a list of improvements that you could make, energy conservation measures you might put in place, and the estimated savings associated with each of those. We also like to always point out the energy efficiency incentives and rebates that are available through our local utilities. Ameren, Missouri, they have a program called Biz Savers, and some of their standard incentives include interior lighting upgrades, occupancy sensors, exit sign replacements, shifting those to LEDs, updating cooking and refrigeration equipment, installing smart and programmable thermostats, and updating HVAC equipment. Both utilities have the opportunity to look at customized, more customized incentives as well if you had a project that didn't fit within their standard rebates. So we always encourage people to contact the utility or their implementers to talk about what the options are. And then for Spire, they offer incentives for boiler tune-ups, for replacements with more efficient systems, updating water heating if it's heated by natural gas, updating food service equipment. Spire actually does have a rebate for energy audits, and they also provide incentives for updating HVAC equipment and programmable thermostats. And then, obviously there may be some upfront costs associated with making building improvements. Hopefully in the long run, you'll be saving money then on energy, but there are some tools available for addressing those upfront costs. The city of St. Louis does have its own PACE program, Set the Pace St. Louis, and that's Property Assessed Clean Energy. So that's an option. The Missouri Division of Energy actually has a loan program that's available for certain building types for K through 12 schools, hospitals, higher ed institutions, and municipalities. The U.S. Department of Energy has a Better Buildings Financing Navigator that can be helpful. And then some of our local partners, Renew Missouri and the Tower Grove Community Development Corporation, put together a financial assistance report for the Building Energy Performance Standard compliance that lists out a lot of great opportunities, most a little specific to affordable housing, but still a really good resource. And there's more information always on the stlbenchmarking.com website. Some additional resources, the City of St. Louis Building Division has a concierge service that is available for, if you need help benchmarking, you can contact them through email or phone. We mentioned earlier that Portfolio Manager has a lot of trainings available. Those are both on demand and live, and they are free. Everything on the Portfolio Manager site is free. We've paid for it with our tax dollars, I'm sure. So really encourage people to dive into those training opportunities. And then locally, we have been working to pull together a new program called the Building Energy Exchange St. Louis that we hired a new full-time staff person, Kara Spencer, in September, and she will be officially launching the Building Energy Exchange in February with a new website, but is also available, to reach out to now. And now we have time for some questions, if anyone has any questions. Any questions? We good?
Yeah, Katerina, Lisa, do you guys have any questions?
I don't. It all seems pretty clear.
It's a pretty good presentation. It gives you a pretty good view of overall program.
Great. Well, if there are no questions, then we will wrap up this benchmarking basics session. Thank you both for attending. Thanks, Rajiv, for co-presenting. And we'll suppose be doing more of this in the new year. So have a great day, everyone. I'm going to stop
you.